Well, welcome to Friday Night Vespers. I am humbled to be here to try and lead out since Dennis was unable to make it in time. Hopefully he'll be watching a little later. So we are grateful that you are all here. We weren't sure who was going to show up, so I'm not nearly as versed as Dennis is on this stuff, but we're going to be going over some of the basics, and then next time he'll be able to go in deeper. So this way we'll get a little bit of an overview, and hopefully anyway. And the Spirit will lead us. So let's go ahead and open with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started. Heavenly Father, we are here to overcome through your Spirit, your Son. Without him, we have nothing. We must rely on you for all things, for you have given us all things, and we are just grateful for your continued mercy and love. Through all the mistakes and issues that we put ourselves through, you continue to reach out to us. And I just pray that your Spirit would be here now to enlighten us, to speak through me, to give me your words and your understanding as we study this message for such an important time as this. We just are grateful for your prophetic word and your historic word and your current living word. Father, you give us all these things that help us to have the hope and faith and love that comes from knowing you have everything in control from the past to the future to the present. And we are just grateful to be here, to be alive at this time. May we be used for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so we're working on moving on to Revelation 12, I believe. Dennis may go over a little bit more of the previous chapters. We kind of moving around and through, but could anyone tell me what Revelation 12 is about? How does it begin? Do you know? What does it say? What is the? Some Bibles have a title, topic, headline, and mine says "The Woman, the Child, and the Dragon." So I think that's actually a fairly accurate. Sometimes they're not as accurate, so I wouldn't trust those to necessarily be 100%. But it often at least gives you an idea of some of what's in that chapter, at least the beginning part of it. Oh, so you got a different one. Okay. Woman in Israel, I like that too. And that is another aspect of this. That's where we're going to find out. So I'm just going to read through part of this, and then we'll go back into it and discuss it. Chapter 12, verse 1. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that she should feed her there 1,260 days. So we'll stop there because there's a lot of stuff in there. Now, I like how it starts out with a great sign appeared in heaven. So again, a lot of what we see in Revelation is all about signs, right? It's symbolic, symbols. It's telling us information and showing us things. One of the first things we learn about is Christ. We hear about him walking, through the lampstands, and eyes like fire and feet like brass, and all these other things that are going on. So we have all these signs and symbols going on. And so it says a woman clothed with the sun. So what do we know a woman represents in the Bible? The church. That's right. So that would make sense then again that this is probably talking about the church. And it says, clothed with the sun. Now, what does that mean? Have you thought about what that would mean? What do we know the sun has representation in the Bible? I mean, there's a few things, but in Revelation, we've kind of dealt with it already a little bit. There's that, do you remember? We have the holiness of God, right? The power of God, the brightness, the light. Because the sun is a source of light, and God is a source of light. The sun is also a source of life for us on earth. And in similar way, God is a source of life for everything. But then it says, with the moon under her feet. Now, what does that mean? What does the moon do? Let's look at what the moon does first real quick. What is the moon? What do we use the moon for? It's what? It reflects sunlight, yes. It basically provides a light in a dark place, you might say. It doesn't have light of its own. It doesn't produce light of its own, but it does reflect the light. So that has a little bit of a meaning there too, I think. That gives us a little understanding of what this is doing. So we have a woman that is clothed with the sun. She has brightness, but under her feet. Now, does that mean that what's under her feet is somehow, bad or just not worth anything? It's like, I can stomp on you all I want. Is that? Do you think that's what that's meaning, or why is it that it's under her feet? Mm. Oh, okay. I like that. Let me get you a mic here real quick, because that way I don't have to try and repeat everything you said. So yeah, I like what you're saying there. It kind of represents being over, powering over in a sense, or having control over, having it under you. So it's those things that are under you. Yeah. And since you have that power, then what you are over it is that power over those things. Yeah. Now, what else do we know about what the moon does and what it can represent? Let's put it that way. What else does the moon represent often? Do you remember that Ellen White herself talks about often to see her works as a lesser light, like a reflection that's. So again, you have this idea that you have the sun that gives you all the main power, but then God uses other things to also provide information and knowledge and light, so that He reaches multiple places. Which, I mean, if you think about just how the sun and moon work, it's an incredible, wonderful thing that works the way it does. I mean, can you imagine if every night we never had a moon? Every night would be incredibly dark. It does happen at times. There's certain times when the moon cycle gets around where we have no moon and it is dark. It is incredibly dark. Yet having that moon, every night when that's out, you know that you're going to get at least some amount of light when that side gets none of the sun. You just cannot, you're in a dark place. And so I think it's just a wonderful example, again, of how God uses His own creation to tell how He works, how He does things. He can be everywhere, and He has the power. He provides power for everything, but at the same time, we can choose to be away from God. We can choose to turn away from God. We can choose to be in the dark. But then God also provides ways that even in the dark, there are those that can be used to give information, to reflect the character of God and help guide people in those times when they're just not sure what else they can see and find. As we're waiting to come back around to that sun, is it really there anymore? It's interesting when you look back at the history of humanity. I mean, they did all types they would sacrifice children in the attempt to try and hope that they would get that sun to come back around to have the nice warm days that you could grow food and no more winter. That's how serious they felt about having that sun come around. That was, it had to become something where it was life-giving. And so they were willing to see it as a god and say, man, why isn't it coming? It's taking forever. It's not coming back. It's getting dark. It's cold. We're dying. What can we do to get that sun to come back?
I think also, in relation to the sun and the moon, there every now and again there is a solar eclipse where the moon blocks out the sun.
Yes.
And when it comes to time, time is relative. It lasts long for us. What could be a long period for us is a second or two to God. And earlier this week in prayer meeting, we discussed how the Dark Ages and just the horrible things that the people of faith endured during that time.
Yes.
And again, for us, it was a long time. But, for God, it was a blip, kind of like a solar eclipse.
Yes. And that is another good aspect of this, is because, again, this isn't where the moon is somehow always 100% what you would want it to be. It's not always the brightest it needs to be. It's not always, sometimes it gets in the way.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Yeah,
it blocks out the sun's,
right.
Heat and light.
And then other times, the moon actually decides, you know what, I'm going to let the earth get in the way. And then it doesn't reflect any light. It now is still there, but it doesn't have, so again, you have that, a lunar eclipse. So again, it's a beautiful symbol how much God put into this, how it, again, reflects how God is able to reach around things, because even if he isn't working in a sense in a direct fashion, even though he's all around us, but if we're not able to really see clearly to him directly and see that bright sun of him, he still gives us other ways. He's reflecting, trying to get our attention, trying to get us that hope of coming back around.
And I think it's the one thing that we should always remember is that when it comes to God, when it comes to the church, when it comes to the earth, it's all relational. We're always going to have a relationship with God. We're always going to have a relationship with the earth, and it's just really, how much time we spent and how much importance we give to our relationship to God versus the earth.
Yes. And I think that's another very important aspect of this, because as we'll get into here in a minute, I do want to cover one more thing about the moon, though. It's also can be something that represents, the Word of God, the idea of the Old Testament and the shadows, the things that it represents. That's another interpretation that some use for it, because it reflects the types and shadows. So in other words, it's not God, and we've seen that throughout the prophecies. You'll see things that are very similar. When we read them, we're like, the things in David in the Psalms. He's talking about the gospel. I mean, you can hear him talking as though he's on the cross, and yet he's prophesying about this. This isn't David on the cross. He's talking about the very thing, though, that will happen. So again, it's a type, it's a shadow of things to come. And a moon does that. It doesn't have its own light, but it does present what is coming. Which again, having it underneath the feet shows that this is something the woman in the sunlight with that power is in possession of, is in control of, is saying, I am guiding the direction of what you're seeing that's coming off of that moon, what is reflecting. Those shadows mean something. It's not just happening out of circumstance. Now, it goes into what? The 12 stars, right? And on her head, a garland of 12 stars. So what do stars represent? They can represent a few things, actually. As we've read some, and I saw a star fall from heaven. We were just studying that last time. And so, we know that it can represent things from heaven, heavenly things that come down. Can represent people. It's what do stars do? What do you notice when you see a star?
It's light.
It's another type of light, right? But it's not as bright. It's not, to be honest, our sun is a star, but it's so close and so bright that we don't see it as a star. The stars are farther away. They don't have the same representation, but they have an importance and the power given to them.
Yeah. They're not as important, let's say, as they were a couple hundred years ago, where those that were navigating the oceans were using the North Star to guide them. Mm-hmm. And so in a sense, it's almost like, because it's nighttime, we need that guidance. And during those difficult times, and we look to the heavenly beings. Mm-hmm. We look towards, because I always like, it's 12 stars, so I automatically think the 12 tribes of Israel. And how we're connected to God through those 12 tribes. And so
yes,
they like you mentioned earlier, the Old Testament, it's still a guiding light to us, even during the dark times.
There's another 12 too, because you have Old Testament with the 12 tribes, and it moves into the New Testament. But in the New Testament, what else do you have that's 12?
The disciples.
Yes, you have the 12 disciples, the apostles. And again, both of those are used as a representation of messages being brought forward, different ideas. Which the idea of message, I think, is very important when we think of a star. What do we call the beings that God sends to us? The angels. What do we call them? What else are they besides angel? They have another term you could use for them. You know what that is?
Well, I think you said it, messengers.
Messengers. It's a messenger. An angel is a messenger. Yeah. Remember the angels came to the shepherds. They brought a message. They came to Mary. They brought a message. They get around a lot with a lot of messages. Yes. But then that also means that I think we can see stars as messages sent from a heavenly place. It's from God. So not only are we supposed to see it in the reflection of the moon and the things that are there, this big source, there are these little sources that actually blink, because stars, because of our atmosphere, they actually blink. They don't actually literally blink, but because of the way we see them through the atmosphere, they blink. And so it draws your attention. It's very small. It's not something that's going to, that's easy to see. I get that. You have to kind of look and study, what does that mean? Where is it going? We as messengers can also have that given to us, such as the apostles. They had a message from God, so that they weren't just reflecting the moon. They were also having a message from God directly to share.
I mentioned it earlier how, nowadays stars aren't that important to us anymore. They used to be studied. People used to go outside, and when you look at humanity nowadays, there's so much light pollution. Sometimes you can't even see the stars. Mm-hmm. Or instead of going outside to see the stars, you just go online. And I think it's somewhat reflective of today's world, where rather than going to church and connecting with individuals, they would just prefer to stay at home and watch it online. And
that is very, very true.
Connection.
That is very true. And, I know for myself, I've lived in the country at times and always loved the stars. And, it's strange, because even where I live, I see stars. But anytime I get really far out, it just dawns on me how many stars I'm actually missing. It just shocks you again, even though I've seen it, several times in my childhood and in my youth and even young adult. There were times when I would see this stuff and it just still all of a sudden, wow. Yeah. But you have to get out of the other light that's the fake light that's around there. So again, you have those messages, but you can't always see them again if you're not looking for them. I mean, the wise men, they look for the star. The Jews saw the star and, just another star. When you're looking for something, you can find what you're looking for often. So now it goes on to say, being with child, she cried out in labor, pain, and in pain to give birth. So this woman now has a child, or is with child. So what does that mean? That doesn't have a child yet. Right. Yeah, it's still being...
She's expecting.
Expected. It's going to be born, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what does that represent? I mean, that's pretty obvious. I think we've heard this story from the very beginning of Genesis, really.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, what was the thing that Eve was hoping for? That her child would be that promised child, right? And even through the line, down the line, you get women after women that were hoping that their child would be the Messiah, the one to come, the promised. And so, obviously, this isn't speaking about a singular woman or anything. This is, again, the church. But it's also more than just maybe the church. It's more of just God's people, in a sense. It's who God is working with throughout the ages. Whether it was, started out with just Adam and Eve, and then it became Israel, and you had Noah and those different types between. It's not just Israel. It's not just Adam and Eve. It's not just these things. It's all along God has had his people waiting for that promise, to give that promise, and he was using them to provide that promise. And the important part is to understand that this woman isn't somehow doing it on her own will or anything like that. This is happening in heaven. This is something that was being given to the woman, not something that she just decides to do on her own. She isn't providing a Christ, let's put it that way. Now, it goes on, and we move into another sign, right? But talking about her being pregnant, what does that, just to be real clear on that, what is it that she's pregnant with? What are we looking for? Jesus, right?
You said it, the Messiah.
The Messiah, yes, but I want to be real clear on that. It is Jesus. He is coming through that woman, which again is a good point to bring out because of the Son. She's clothed with the Son. So again, it's not that the woman, the church, is not the Son. It has the Spirit of God. It's clothed with it, just as we have to be clothed with God, Jesus' righteousness, right? We put that on. So again, she is someone that is having power put on her that way and given a child. And I think it's important, again, that we really think about what it is that woman was given when we say that she's clothed with the Son. Because it's not just saying that she had the Son above her, or that the Son was somehow in her heart, or that she was reflecting the Son, or any of these things. This is clothed with the Son. So the church is being given something. What was it that had been given throughout that they were hoping for, that even was talking about the idea of this Messiah coming, right? What was that message that was being led up to? What do we call it in the New Testament? We were given the gospel, right? So this is a gospel message that basically has been presented and put over the woman. The church is to present this to the world, to say, this is coming. Here is what's happening. God is the one over this, reflecting it through the moon and through the people. But it's all about God, Jesus, giving this message. It is not the woman itself. It is that God is providing this power and this child that is coming. And so it's really important that we see the symbolism and not try to, a lot of people like to say, well, if you have the Son, that somehow now you are the Son. It's easy to get a very complex. You can easily get that type of view.
Or make the woman into the God.
Oh, yes, that too. You can make the woman into God, or you can, you pull it away from that. You say someone else provides this. Actually, that's a good example, because we have in the Catholic Church has someone who represents God as the head of the church. So again, it's someone, as much as we talk about the church as a woman and being just the body of the church, some religions actually narrow that down to a person who represents the church, which then now makes them, a very major part compared to what we would see just as a group, as a church. Now it's held in a singular person. But we need to move on with that. But it's very important that we understand that separation. So then it goes into another sign appeared. So again, this is something else now happens, right? We're learning something else. A great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. That sounds familiar, but like we've read that somewhere before. Anyone remember where we've read something like that? Daniel. So when we were studying that, we definitely went over something very similar, right? So what then does the dragon represent? I mean, obviously we've got great, so it's powerful. And fiery red, meaning must be bright, dangerous, of some type. Usually nothing is red that is, when you look at a fire extinguisher, it's often red. So you know it can do something, not always bad, but at least you know it's important. The red exit signs. Red has importance and, something to it to watch for.
Well, it's attractive. It's something that catches the eye. Again, I mean, Satan's not going to come at us, with the typical red horns and the pitchfork and everything. He's going to come at us as an attractive being.
Right. Well, and I like that because it's also used as a type of message. Lucifer was a messenger. He was an angel. He had that role. So he still has that ability. He just doesn't do it for God. He can use it for his own ways. So of course he's going to appear in a way that is important and provides things. In fact, how did he appear to Jesus in the wilderness? At first he came as an angel of light. He came like a bright message. He had that, fieriness to him. And so now we have that fiery red dragon with the 7 heads and 10 horns and the 7 diadems. And since we've gone over that in Daniel, I'm not going to go into that too deep, but that just represents the apostate Rome, the church, the leadership as it came through, the kings, the leaders, the popes, the different things that had led to this type of power. So the devil doesn't just come by himself. He presents himself through another being, you might say, through another. So you have Jesus representing himself over a people, over the woman, and you have Satan using beasts, some type of person, object, living thing, to also affect the world. And again, of course, we know that Satan loves to mirror God. He makes it his own way, but he likes to try and be God. So he's going to, if you think about it, what else does he know? He's worked with God for who knows how long. The only way to be God is to know God, and since he knows God, he has to be kind of like God, but he has to make it his own version. He's not going to come up with something new because he's not God. He doesn't know all things. He's just making a bad mirror view of something to try and just tweak it a little bit to try and make it his own. It's often like what we see with when people invent something. They make some really great invention, and then someone else, maybe in China or some other place where they don't have the laws to restrict it, they'll actually make a duplicate of it. And some of them can be very good, but they're never the exact because they don't have, well, they shouldn't have anyway, the exact same parts in them. And so they try to change things a little bit just to make it so it's like, it's different.
Yeah, the term is a cheap knockoff.
There you go. And so again, we do have that with Satan. Another thing I find interesting is red light, something you might not know about the color red that we use for light. It's a light that you can actually use for your eyesight at night. They say if you were to, if you wake up and you need to turn on a light and you don't want to hurt your eyes as much, a red light is something that allows you to see, but it doesn't affect your eyes the same way as full light does. Full light makes you go squint, and it starts changing, and you start seeing colors more. But when you use a red light, it actually doesn't affect the eyes the same way, and so you get the ability to see in the dark, but you also don't get that full effect where then if all of a sudden the lights all go off, you don't have the dark vision anymore that you had. It's used as a way to have some vision in the dark, which I think, again, is a very interesting representation of what Satan tries to do, because he's trying to be God. So he wants to appear like he has real light. He wants to appear like he's not doing something to you that, is going to make you turn away from him. He wants you to pay some attention. This is important. It doesn't hurt. And if it goes away, you're not feeling like you lost all that much. It's just something different. So as we go on, his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. So what does that represent?
The third of the angels that sided with him.
Third of the angels, right? So now we know some of what this story is telling us about, right? Not only just about the gospel and Jesus coming, but it's defining why he had to come, why these things are happening. What is this about? And that is about that dragon who took a third of the stars. So now it's interesting that stars are mentioned here again. Now it's not mentioned as the 12 stars, but they are stars. And what would we know of stars? Again, they're messengers, right? Messengers can be seen as angels. So we can say that here are these angels that he took. He drew some of these stars, some of these representations that God uses to give messages. He took them and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. Obviously, we know the different things that Satan tried to do throughout history. I mean, I think this is important because it's not just with Mary. I mean, he obviously did a lot to try and stop that too. A lot of different things he tried to do. But throughout history, from Adam all the way down there, he has waited trying to stop that birth. When Moses, we were studying some about Moses, and we're studying in Sabbath school, Moses is a representation again of Christ coming and the bringing salvation. And so Satan didn't know if Moses was going to be the Messiah or not. So he actually tried to get rid of Moses. We know the story of how he attempted several ways to try and kill off all the male. So again, we can see how throughout history Satan has been trying to catch that baby before it comes, because he knows that is not a good thing for him. But she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And I wish we could stop right there in some ways and just say, and now he's in charge and over there, and we can go meet him, and we're all good, and nothing's bad anymore. But we have to read on a little more, and it says, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Meaning, we're still, as much as he is in control, he has that rod of iron and will rule all nations, that time isn't fully here yet. There are things that are still going to go on. And this is where we run into a bit of a problem. Then the woman fled into the wilderness. Why did she flee? What happens when a child is born that Satan wants to destroy, and then it's taken away from him so he can't destroy it? What's left? That woman that had to go and give that child birth. Let's get rid of her. So she has to flee into the wilderness, but she has a place prepared by God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Now that's an interesting number. I think we've heard that before, right? Obviously, that's the day is a year principle and all that we've studied before, so we won't go into that too deep. But it's important also, though, to remember that the woman, again, didn't have to go into the wilderness and somehow provide for herself. She went into the wilderness where they should feed her there. So, she was given help. God has been with us all along, even though she is that woman is under distress and having problems and being chased by a red dragon who wants to devour her. You have this fact that God is never leaving us. He's always helping along the way. Now, verse 7. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. Let's just stop right there and go over that. War broke out in heaven. Well, what do we know about that? We've already studied some of that, right? We know how that works. The great controversy is still going on. It's still a war that is happening. Now, Michael and his angels. Who is Michael? Where does that term come from? Do you know? I'm not even fully sure. There's Michael the archangel, right? So it's the head. It's known as a head, and we often relate it to Jesus, right? He is the head of the angels. We hear him. He was the one that was over Satan. Even he had. Of course, he's not just an angel. He is God, but Lucifer was designed to be very much underneath him, very close. As is another angel. We know another angel that has that type of power. You know his name? Gabriel. Yeah, so again, remember there's the cherubs. They sit over the Ark of the Covenant. There were two angels that would sit over that. We believe one was Gabriel and the other might have been Lucifer. They would have been the ones that would have catered that closely to God, that they were under Jesus and the Trinity there. So, obviously, now you have Jesus fighting the dragon. And the dragon could not prevail and his angels. And there was no place found for them in heaven any longer. So it sounds like, for a while, that war was going on and they were allowed to stay up there and battle. It was going on, but now Michael's like, this is done. You can't be up here anymore. You got to go. And so the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So it's interesting, as we read earlier, that we see that the dragon drew a third of the stars, right? And threw them to the earth. Well, he didn't do that just on his own, in some ways here. He did that part in terms of guiding them to do that and wanting to do that, but it happened that they were pushed to the earth not because they're just like, well, let's just go. They were cast out of heaven. Yes? The mic is there if you want to.
Yeah, Kylie, when you said 1/3 of the angels, I think the reason why they were thrown out of heaven is because the completeness of the deception and those that made that decision to stay and believe in God were the ones. So there was this complete separation. And so that's when they were driven out because the angels made their decisions already.
Right. And that's important. They had made their decision. The things were now decided. The war was moving into a new phase, you might say. Mm-hmm. There was a point where they had a right to try and prove themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, their battle had been shown that they don't have a right to be in heaven, but they still have some goals left that they can try. If they want to try living somewhere else, that's still a part of their battle plan. But they are no longer allowed to have that right to heaven. Mm-hmm. And so they had, again, wars move on, as we've seen. I mean, even watching Ukraine and Russia, the different battlefields changed, tactics changed, times changed, seasons where different parts of the battles and who's winning and losing things have to change. And the same thing with the war in heaven. It's progressing, which is a good thing. If this was a stalemate, like we're kind of seeing in Russia right now and Ukraine, that's not a good thing. That means war forever and it's just depressing, but God is moving this through. It is going to be finished. There will not be a point where this is just the devil sits over there doing his thing for the rest of eternity. Now, when the woman fled to the wilderness, what did that represent in the timeline of what do we represent that as? Do you know what I mean? In other words, what historical act of the church, of God's people, represents this time where the church flees into a wilderness?
It's a persecution.
What was that?
The church was being persecuted.
Right, the persecution. So when was the persecution happening? When did that kind of start? What do we call that time period where?
Darkness.
The Dark Ages,
Dark
right?
Ages.
Yeah, you had all this. They were hunting them. I mean, you had the small remnant groups. What you said, you had the Waldenses, and you had small groups of people who were hiding in the wilderness and trying to stay alive. And the church, the power of pagan Rome and papal Rome was trying to wipe them out. And so again, you have that Dark Ages happening. And that's, again, goes into that timeline that we've talked about before, the 1260, which, 1260 years, which, anyone know what that time frame is? That would go from 538 AD to 1798 AD. What happened in 1798 AD? Just as a little refresher. Do you remember? The Pope was removed from power. Remember Napoleon? They're like, we're done with this. And yet, Napoleon didn't fully do the job. It looked like it was fatal, but there was enough left to go on. But that was that period where, during that early section of history, the woman was just constantly embattled. But while that battle was going on, there was also still the war in heaven, and that's where we get into, again, with Michael, Jesus, and Satan and his angels. And then that the battle would continue on earth. So now, no longer is it just, it's just a heavenly battle. Now it's very much focused on earth because they've been cast out of heaven, so they can't do a lot of fighting there. So if you can't fight in the enemy territory that you want to fight in, now you fight in your own territory and try to take and cause as much damage and pain as possible. So that's what Satan is doing. As much as he caused pain beforehand, he is trying to cause even more pain now because he knows his time is short, as the Bible says. Now, moving on to the last little bit of verses here. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. So in this war, what else was happening? What do we see here? We were noticing something else happening. Do you see what's going on here? This war wasn't just Satan and his angels up there fighting God. He was doing something else at the same time.
He was accusing us.
Accusing day and night. Yeah. I mean, he knows that he needs witnesses, you might say. He needs representation. He needs people that prove his point. Yeah. His angels and him are not enough to do it. He knows he wants to prove to God, your people are failures. Look at him. Look at Kyle. Look what he did. He did this and this. Oh, Lord, how can you let him live? He's so horrible.
Yeah, and even when he can't find fault, he rationalizes to God, like Job.
Yes.
If you take away his family, if you take away his property, if you take away his health, he'll crush you to your face.
Oh, yeah. It's not enough to even just accuse you of doing something. He wants to set you up into a situation where he knows you'll probably fail. Okay. It's not just enough to go, well, I lost this one. Bye. This is, no, you are protecting him, God. You're doing these things, so he'll fall away. Yeah. He is constantly. But then that's the beauty of this now is that, he is no longer given that type of power, as we can see. Now that the child has been born and returned, we are now understanding that he can't always just do this accusing day and night, that this is, as it says, he's been cast down, and not by our power, but because of the power of his Christ have come. Mm-hmm. So again, it's interesting, by having Christ come into the church, to be human, to be part of us, Satan was given a chance to accuse God directly in a human form instead of as God form. So now he had both. He'd been accusing him and warring with God in heaven as God. But now he says, the humans can't do it. Look at, they failed. Look at those failures. Christ comes and does what no other human can do. Now, how does he accuse? What can he accuse? That he cannot accuse and say that humans cannot do this anymore, because now Christ himself has proven that his accusations mean nothing if it's Christ.
They're baseless.
They're baseless. And so they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, which is a very important thing, again, we have to keep in mind. how do we overcome? We've been studying that all along, right?
Only through Christ.
We overcome by the blood of the Lamb. So this is, again, not something we can do just on our own. This isn't a knowledge thing. This isn't an effort type of thing. This is the fact that you accept the blood of the Lamb. What did we find in Egypt? What did they do on the last plague? They were told to put the blood of the Lamb on the doorpost, right? Oh, that, again, that was not something. What did they do? They killed the lamb. That doesn't mean anything. If anything, that's kind of cruel. So here it is. Again, it's showing that in order to overcome, it's nothing about the power we use to do something. It is trusting in the power of what we're told to do. And that's where the blood of the Lamb, so we trust that the blood of the Lamb actually means something that has purpose, and by the word of their testimony. What good is it if you trust in something, but then you never actually speak about it? If someone says, how were you saved? Yeah, just luck. That means nothing then. That doesn't mean you know anything about the blood of the Lamb. In fact, you're using it as an excuse to go, I don't think it was actually anything. It was just luck. There is no God.
Just to circle back to the beginning, Jesus said it himself, we are the light of the world. And it's that light, it needs to be shined bright, not because it's got anything to do with us, like you said, it's a reflection of Jesus.
Right.
That's the importance of it. And the more lights there are in the sky, the more stars there are up there, the brighter, and the more possibility that someone not only will not get lost, but that they'll be guided to the one that can save.
Exactly. And so again, we also have that picture of the moon. Again, it's reflective. It's not, these people are not just winning because of somehow having their own power. They don't have the sun themselves. They're reflecting that character, that light. And when we look at the moon reflects differently depending on how much light it's receiving. Again, that's representative both in history time, because as we've seen, as time went along, we've gained more knowledge and understanding of what the Bible is actually talking about. Israel had a lot of information, but there was parts of it they didn't fully understand, and then Jesus explained that, and so you had Paul understanding it was going to the Gentiles, and it's just been increasing all along. And just as the moon goes through phases, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter the more it's able to reflect, and that should be in our life too. The more we learn, the more we reflect, the brighter we get, and the more power we're able to give to a dark world. Not through our own power, but representing that power. Now, it says, and they did not love their lives to the death. That is a very important phrase. Why is that important? And they did not love their lives to the death. Do you remember a very similar phrase somewhere in the Gospels?
I think I might butcher this. But
I believe it's John, right? In the beginning of John, the first chapter of John, I believe there is somewhere, maybe the second, but it's he's talking about the light and the dark. And what does it say? This is, they love the darkness. They love it unto death. But this says, and they did not love their lives to the death. So what does that mean? They didn't love the darkness, right? They were willing to look for something else. They were realizing that the darkness that was being presented, that light that Satan is fake trying to present, was not it. And so they weren't going to let the darkness take them. They weren't going to trust that the darkness was somehow right, as Satan has been trying to say. He's like saying, you can survive in the dark. We do it. I walk out at night. I can go in the dark, right? I can survive. No, this is saying, look, if you love the dark, you will at some point be forever in the dark, to the point that you can't live. If you're in darkness forever, you're dead. That's just the way it works. We have to have light. And so the same thing here is you can love that darkness so much where it's easier. It doesn't hurt the eyes as much. It's cooler. It doesn't always burn. You're not as active. You can just kind of lay back and relax. It's a little easier at night sometimes. Less going on. Sometimes there's parties. Oh yeah, you can do a lot in the nighttime compared to why do you think a lot of the immoral type of activities tend to be nighttime based? Because they can hide from police and people, and it's all in the cover of darkness. And so again, you can love that darkness, but they do not. They do not love their lives to the death.
I think it's Matthew 16:25 says, "Those who want to save their lives will lose them, but those who lose their lives for me will find them."
Yes, that's right there in Matthew. There's that one too. Yes, that is good. Again, it's all about what do you love? You know, for Satan, what was his big thing happening to him?
It was his pride. So
His pride. He loved himself. It
yeah.
even says that. He was like, he saw in himself, he's like, dude, I am good. Look at me. I am bright. I am smart. I'm right with God. I'm in on almost all the things, but why not? Yeah, I'm right there next to God. Why can't I be with Jesus and hear some of these, creation things? I'm right there. I don't explode in his presence. I must be pretty good. He had that idea that, and look at all the angels love me. They worship me. They come to me. I'm in control. It's amazing how he starts seeing his own life as his own source of importance.
Yeah.
And that's where you can love your life to death. Because if you love yourself more than the person who gave you life, the one who provides your life, you are saying, I don't want your life. You get away from me. I will provide my own life.
Yeah.
How can you do that? You're not God. Satan isn't God. As much as he had power, at some point, it's gone.
I think it's John 3:3 where it says, "I must decrease, he must increase."
Ah, yes, John the Baptist. Again, that shows how he had such a different view from Lucifer. Lucifer, I need to get more. God's holding me back. John, when this is happening, his disciples start telling him, you're losing stuff here, buddy. let's pull this back. We don't want to get too far out of this importance.
And he had nothing. He had nothing, absolutely nothing that he had love for of this earth. It was all towards, and it wasn't even towards anything that he was doing. It was preparing the path for Christ.
Right. So again, it's what you love. It really does come down to what you love. If you want to overcome, if you think you are going to overcome, you will love yourself to overcome, and it's not going to work. You can't overcome something. I mean, if we're less than the angels, how can you expect to even overcome an angel, let alone overcome God? Now, we have just a little bit more time here because we did get a little bit of a late start, so let's see if we can finish off this chapter. Let's see, we left off at 12, I think. Yes. Therefore, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. So now we're getting one of the woes, which we had heard about that woe earlier, so it's possible that we're starting to see some lineup here, right? That, again, like we've seen how the seal and trumpet and the churches, they all have certain time periods that line up. We're seeing a woe happening. Does this mean that it's similar to that first woe we heard? Again, we have different things happening that way. I'm not going to get too into that right now because we don't have time, but something to think about. And so it's woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea. Okay, so this is, what do we know about the sea in prophecy? What do we see it as? It's besides peoples. It also has another representation that we know of. What is the sea? We were just dealing with it with the trumpets. We had the earth. What does the earth represent? Protestantism, right? And then you have the sea. What does the sea represent? Catholicism. So again, you have these symbols here. Of course, they can represent other things too, but that is one aspect of it, is that he's not just coming down to one group, or that he's taking them all on. Because he knows his time is short. Now, when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time, from the presence of the serpent. So again, the times, and half a times is similar to what we just read in another variation, right? 1260, yeah. It's part of that same timeline, the stuff we've studied in Daniel. I'm not going to get into it again deeply now. But I want to point out again that the two wings of a great eagle. Where did we read that about before? We've been discussing
Exodus.
this. Yes, Exodus.
Yeah.
That when God took the Israelites out of Egypt, he did that on wings of eagles. And we studied wings of eagles being a symbol in Revelation here, right? One of the creatures has wings of eagles. So again, it's showing it's not our power. The woman didn't escape somehow because she had some knowledge or some skills.
No.
She was given power to get away. And not only given power to get away, but then also given the nourishment
Yeah.
during that tough time. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So good. We got some more symbolism going on here. We've got a flood. We've got Satan, spewing out water. But then the earth appears. Now the earth actually helps. Now what does the earth represent in that case? Any ideas? We already talked about one aspect of the earth. We see it as Protestantism, right? Well, when did that happen? How did that happen? What caused that to happen? Where did it happen? Where did some of that begin? Let's put it that way. There's someone we know who's helped, very much push this the Protestants.
Luther?
Martin Luther. He was the one, and there were others. There was Calvin. There was all these others who, again, were fighting back against the church, the sea.
Yeah.
So in essence, they came out of the earth. They were part of that earth, and they started fighting back. They started taking away the power that the serpent was trying to put out there. The serpent's trying to wash them away, wipe them off the face of the earth, you might say. But the earth stepped up and started speaking out. You are wrong. You don't have this. And then even God himself provided literal earth. What was founded during that time period of that dark ages that allowed people to escape the persecution? What land mass was discovered?
New world.
The new world. A new earth. Now, it wasn't created new that it just all of a sudden appeared, but it was new in the sense that, the church had never reached there. No one even knew it was there. They weren't sure of it. They thought they were going to fall off. So this was, something. God provided a whole other place where they were afraid to even go for a while. This was something they weren't going to get there easy. So God himself provided earth. The people on the earth spoke up for the earth, you might say. They came out of that sea and said, you are teaching wrong ideas. They spoke up. And so they took that flood that Satan was trying to wipe off the whole planet, which is interesting how, again, Satan uses similar effects to God. What did God do with the flood?
Yeah.
He literally wiped off the face of the earth. Satan can't quite do that.
No.
So he tried to use the power of the people to wipe off the face of the earth enough to basically to do the similar thing in that continent and hope that no one gets anywhere else.
Yeah.
God wasn't having that. Just as God saved Noah, again, God is providing for his people and provided a way to kind of be saved from that wave of deception and destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes on that, again, we have the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Ooh, what do we got going on here now? So he tried to swallow him up. He tried to wipe off the earth, everyone, all that woman, everyone off. Mm-hmm. Well, that didn't work because they're just still out there. Now they're out of his reach somewhat. So now he actually has to go, and he's like, I got to go get that woman now. So he can't just stay on the, he's got to go and find. So now he goes to make war with the rest of her offspring. So he's no longer just confining his efforts to that continent area. He's actually having to look out and go and find and create even more war. Because he can't just let them have their nice merry way. That woman, she's out there enjoying her wonderful time with God, and following the way she believes she should follow God, being a good church.
Yeah, because my version says children. I'm not sure if. Yeah, and I
Offspring.
Think
yes.
I think it's interesting because when we think about our own church, our Seventh-day Adventist Church, the one age group that is declining and has been declining greatly over the last 50, 75 years is the youth. And he's going after them so that.
Well, he's always gone after the child.
Yeah.
He knows it's whatever comes out of the woman is more important than even what. Which is another very interesting thing I think we need to realize here, is because we've gone from this woman being something that we saw as pure and holy and providing a lot of things, to all of a sudden now, why is he making war with the offspring? Why is she having offspring? She just had this male child. Why is there more offspring? What is offspring? What would you consider, as you said, a child, right? So does that mean she has more children? Possibly, right?
Yeah, because when you think about it, there's lots of branches of Christianity. So.
Right. And yet, in a sense, we all came from that very same source. Even Adventists, as a remnant, as we see ourselves, the Waldenses, they were a remnant. We've all still come from that original Christianity. So it's not like we are not related to the Catholic faith in a sense, where we all have this. The Catholic faith was Christianity for a while. It was the right thing before it became the Catholic faith. It was set up by the apostles. It was by Jesus himself. Christianity was going right. It was doing its right. It became apostate. It fell away from the truth and started producing these children that had to come out. And so again, we have them coming out who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, where did we hear the phrase testimony of Jesus Christ? Very beginning of this book, right? This is the revelation, the testimony of Jesus. So again, that's one of the things we have, is we have an understanding of Revelation. But also we keep the commandments of God. Now, why is that important? Why would they make that distinction when it hasn't been listed anywhere else in the story so far, where of chapter 12, where it said, Satan wasn't following the commandments, or the dragon, or the woman wasn't following the commandments. All of a sudden, the commandments become important here. What happened between the woman giving birth to now her offspring and needing to find the commandments and to follow them?
Well, I think it's because a lot of, like I said earlier, there's a lot of different offshoots of Christianity, and do all of them follow or keep the Ten Commandments? That's the one identifier, along with whether, because Jesus said, how people will know that you're my disciples by how? If you love one another.
Right.
And so that's one of the first, I know it says 10 commandments, but Jesus broke it down into 2 commandments, and that's one of them that we need to follow, that we need to not only follow but live. And unless we're living it, people won't know that we're followers of Christ.
And I like the fact that Jesus came to fulfill the law. So at that time, well, we know the Pharisees and just the Israelites were very focused on the law. They were trying their best to obey the commandments. And Jesus talked to that scribe, and he's like, you're right. It is the love God with all your heart and soul and mind, and the second is like unto it, right? So you have, again, the commandments are all about love and having proper love. Now, what happens, during, after Jesus is taken up, the ascension, the disciples are going around loving. Love is spreading the gospel like crazy. So what did Satan do to help stop that? Besides trying to just torture the woman and try to wipe them off of the face of the earth, he did something else. He tried to change what love means. What was one of the things that caused Catholicism to become the power it really did. Do you remember one of the events? And there were several things along the way. But you had, what's his name, Constantine, right? Where he said, look, we'll make a day of worship here. We'll make it Sunday because most of the heathens already believe in that day, so it's easier that way rather than trying to get them to go to the Jewish one that they're kind of, I don't really like that, you know. It makes sense, right? Why not? It's just a day. It doesn't mean anything. Taking that love and saying, actually, it's more a little like this, how I want it. That's not love. Love is something that's completely unselfish. When you say the love has to be this way because I need to do this, I need to reach these people, I just need it to be different, that's selfish love. And so here is something that changed when the church went from following the commandments to changing the commandments a little bit to try and fit this new ideal. So now you have the offspring. We often do as our parents do. We often fall away and start to, but some children know to look beyond what their parents are doing and find what is right. And so again, you have that testimony of Jesus that is so important to being able to truly follow the commandments. If you don't have that testimony of Jesus, how would you know that that commandment change was so important? You know, it would be hard, right? I mean, you might read in the Bible and go, well, but honestly, the Catholic Church makes a good argument for it. They're like, we have the power to change it. I mean, that seems like a bad argument in one way, but at the same time, they have a lot of power, so why wouldn't they have that ability? What's wrong with them saying, well, God led us to change it? We say the Spirit leads us all the time. Maybe the Spirit led them to do, it'd be very easy to justify it in some way. And that's why you can't just go off of, your knowledge of this. It has to be the testimony of Jesus. It has to be His Spirit speaking in us and speaking through us and teaching us what He really means, because anyone can read the Bible and get any type of story out of it they want. If you don't have the right love in reading the Bible, you're going to love it the way you want to make it. And that's not love. Love is outside of you. It's not inside of you. You have to get it from Christ. And so we have now gone over a little bit extra. I hope you don't mind. But I just hopefully this has covered some of this. Again, we got so much more to do. But this is the basis of this controversy. It's telling the situation up to this point that's been going along. And then we're going to move into a new section in chapter 13. And Dennis may actually go over a little bit of some stuff if there's something else he wanted to cover in that previous section. But I think it's so important to, again, have that full view of God, because it's so easy to get that narrow view. It's like, well, as Adventists, this is the only time that matters. As Catholics, that was the only time that mattered. As the Israelites, that's the only time that really mattered, when things were just like them. And look how it turned out for so many of them. The Israelites, they got so focused on themselves, they didn't realize that the Messiah was right in their midst, in front of them. The Catholic Church got so focused on trying to bring people into the church that they were willing to change what God actually said. And the offspring, they changed too. Some of them, they were like, well, we know we have to get back a little bit to this, but we still want to hold on to a little bit of what Mom taught us. And as Adventists, we could easily get into this idea of, well, we have a lot of truth we've been given by God, right? So therefore, we can't fail this way. We can't, well, the only way we can't fail is if we actually still keep the testimony and commandments of Jesus Christ. We have to stay focused on that and realize that no way along this is it just about Adventism. It's not just about us. It's about God's people. And that's what we see in this whole chapter. From the very beginning to the very end here, we are seeing God leading each step of the way. It was never the Israelites' power on their own. They weren't some chosen people because of their ability, power. It was what they couldn't do, and then what they didn't do. And so all along, God has been giving that power. He comes to the earth Himself and creates the power, and we still mess it up. We cannot keep the power ourselves. So as Adventists, if we want to be the remnant, we can't just go back a little ways. We have to go from the beginning. The beginning is God. Always is God, always been God. You can't go from, well, the Israelites were here, so we're kind of following their faith, and they had it right up until here. Did they? They had it wrong many times. And they didn't even understand Paul, he's like, the Gentiles, man, that's a mystery. I didn't even realize I was there. He was surprised about this. He's like, that was a shocking mystery to me. And so, again, all along, if we try to take it and say the remnant is like the Waldenses, or it's like this, or it's like that, it's like Noah. Well, Noah had some problems too. It's like Adam. Adam had problems too. You have to go to who gave the actual power of control, and that is God through Jesus Christ. So if anyone has questions, otherwise I'll just ask if someone would like to pray. Would someone like to close with prayer? Would you? Thank you. Yeah, it makes it easy. Thank you.
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you so much for this beautiful new Sabbath day that you've allowed us to come together in fellowship to receive. We're grateful, Lord, for the message that you delivered through your servant Kyle. And we just pray and ask, Lord, that this message stay in our hearts, Father, to remember always that it starts with you. We have to stay connected with you. It doesn't, as much as we love this church, Lord, as much as we love what we've learned and what we want to pass along to our kids, Father, it all has to stem from you. It all has to come from you.
Amen.
It all has to revolve around you. We can't overcome Satan unless it's through Jesus Christ. And so we just pray and ask, Lord, that you help us to continue to keep this message in our hearts, Lord, to help us to pass it along, not only to our own kids, Lord, but to others who may not know about your son's great sacrifice. Help us to show them in how we live, Lord, that we keep your commandments, that we love one another, that we love those that are not our family, that we love perfect strangers, Father.
Amen.
And help us to pass along and reflect the light that comes from Jesus Christ, that only comes from Jesus Christ, Father. And so we just want to pray and ask, Father, that you bless those that were watching online. We want to pray for Dennis, for Pastor Benjamin, for anybody who wasn't able to make it here today. And we do want to pray and ask for traveling mercies for everybody. And if it is your will to give us life tomorrow, Father, we just pray and ask that you help us to worship you. And we want to ask this all in the name of your heavenly Son, our Savior and our King, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. And again, I look forward to next week. Dennis should be back. And again, we just, for those of you online, we invite you to come if you can. We're glad you can watch online, but we'd love to have you here. And so, again, have a wonderful Sabbath, and we hope to see you tomorrow for Sabbath School. Dennis will be teaching the Sabbath School, so I recommend coming for that. It should be really good. And, of course, George is teaching the youth, so youth out there, if you're watching, come on. It's, he's a great guy, so you'll love his stuff. I love hearing his stories and sermon stuff. So, come together, come find God and see God for yourself. Experience taste. You can get some taste through this video, but you miss out on potluck. There's real taste in that. You get a little bit more than just, well, that was good spiritual thought, but man, the food can be really good. All right, well, thank you so much, and have a wonderful Sabbath.